Hello and welcome to this video. And on this video today, I am going to be looking at 10 songs or pieces of music that personify the English pastoral countryside. And we're actually out in the countryside. This is a place called Jethro Tull, which is not too far from me. The pool is actually very overgrown. It's over there, and right in the middle of the screen now you can see some houses. That was originally a paper mill. And when I was very little, we're talking about 50 years ago, that paper mill caught fire. And I can remember I was around at my friend's house and we went out in the garden, and I can remember seeing the flames of that as it burnt down. Two firemen came down to fight it, and they died. This lake here, also, when I was a kid, I can think you can see the bit of the water down there. Let's see if I can get a bit closer to the water. When I was a kid, there was a sort of myth that a German Nazi warplane had been shot down and landed in this lake. Taking refuge in this lake, we could see two beautiful swans with their little signets. This video I am filming in 4K. It's my new thing now, so there's going to be no editing, there's going to be no clever graphics, it's just going to be the raw footage. So shall we get on with it? Right, I'm going to swap the camera around now, if we can. There we go. Lovely. Right, let's hold it. Have we got it? There's my feet. Just to show you, we really are here, and I haven't done it with any sort of trickery. And I'm going to get on back onto the main trail now and tell you about the 10 songs I've chosen. I'm going to create a playlist for this. There's a playlist in the link. So at number 10, I've got Little Fluffy Clouds by The Orb. Now, The Orb sort of came out of the sort of dance music explosion that happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And once that happened, it was like a revolution in popular music. And I feel like it was almost like a second wave of prog. And a number of bands came out that were very interesting, The Orb one being one of them. And The Orb took their lead from Gong, Tangerine Dream, a whole bunch of prog. And they started to create these epic tracks that were very psychedelic, but also invoked Englishness in the same way as many English and British progressive rock bands did. So I'm getting puffed on going uphill. You see, I'm sat in my in Grumpy's shed, as it's known. Oh, I've now said the name of the place after all these videos, and I don't get out enough, so I'm getting puffed, aren't I? So the first breakthrough hit was this single, but it's about 20 minutes long, track called Little Fluffy Clouds. And although it had all this sort of electronica and dance propulsiveness, it also has this feeling of the English countryside. When you invoke the English countryside, you're invoking, for me, two types of things. There is the vast sort of patchwork quilt that we're used to, of fields, of large vistas, and that represents a sort of, for me, it's the way us English have negotiated ourselves in the world. Some of it really bad and some of it pretty good, like the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that, liberal philosophy. But when you come into the wood, the domain of the green man, right, you feel that you are entering into a subconscious space. It's internal. The Orbs on that track seem to do both. I'm going to move on now to the second, number 9. If you've noticed, because I'm walking in the countryside, I've had to remember. Let's have a look let's show you where I'm going. I've had to remember the list. So at number 9, I've got Small Hours by John Martin, that is off the album One World. And that is an incredible piece of music. I believe it was recorded in the studio late one night, so late it was actually the small hours of the morning, as described in the title of the song. Right, I'm just going to prop my phone up here like that. So stuck in the studio one morning, John Martin decides to switch the recorder on, and the feeling of that sort of quiet space, that time around about 4 a.m. in the morning when people say you're the closest you can be to the great infinite, or whatever you want to call it is that we're in contact with, if we are. Anyway, and outside he can hear the geese, and he starts to record it, and this gentle tune comes out of John Martin. It was an absolute genius. And it has an ethereal quality to it that, when I hear it, reminds me of the lake here. You know, I always imagine this place, which I think is why I've put it on the list. I nearly put Off Solid Air. Oh no, it's Off Bless the Weather, isn't it? Off Bless the Weather, there's a track called Glistening Glyndebourne, which is sort of a sort of jazz improvised, you know, psychedelic jam, but all acoustic instruments, all very English. It's what I expected Astral Weeks to be, and Astral Weeks isn't. But that is, John Martin is not someone I talk a lot about on my channel, but he's an absolute genius and one of my favourite musicians. Right, at number 8, I have got For Absent Friends by Genesis, which is off Nursery Crime, my favourite album. I'm going to take a walk now, come on. I've had enough study. So, got to watch it. I'm studying a bunch of nettles. It looks all very nice, I assume, on camera. I've actually left the path of righteousness. I'm now into the dark depths of the subconscious forest. Oh my God. There's some stuff going on here. Right, so For Absent Friends, right, for me, there is nothing that personifies the English aesthetic more than progressive rock, even more than the folk rock like Pentangle and Fairport Convention. I love all that stuff. But when prog does it, they seem to be able to go even deeper down. And a lot of the time, it's almost like a parody. You know, sometimes it can be so English, it's tongue-in-cheek. On Nursery Crime, there's a very strange song, and I think it's Phil Collins singing on it, which is it's so un-rock and roll, it's absolutely incredible. And it's basically a short, tiny little piece of music, very delicate, and it tells a story about 2 old ladies going to a graveyard to visit the graves of their now deceased husbands, right? And in that, it's like the most un-rock and roll thing you can ever think of, and it is so un-rock and roll, and yet there's a beauty to it which is absolutely unique to progressive rock. Absolutely unique. And I always find that tune very moving indeed. Right, so that was number 8. So we're at number 7. I found the path again. So I'm going to just change hands if I can. There we go. So at number 7, I've got, and I've had to commit this to memory. I have number 7. Right, I've forgotten it. I'm going to have a look at my bit of paper. I'm pretty sure it's Velvet Green by Jethro Tull. And it is. God, just trust yourself. Oh, it's funny when you walk out to play. It's quite early in the morning here. And I've come out and you realise how stressed out and at odds I am. Sort of this bustling, panicky, trying to get my breath person. Stressing. But now, the effects of this old, still place start to have an effect. What's more important, Andy? Your top 10 or your own sanity? You're trying to evoke something here, but you're not personifying it. Calm it down. Take your time. Take some breaths in, hold, and out. Find yourself a nice log to sit on. Oh, so I do apologise. I realise that in my want to do something good, that ego's taken over. And it's the total opposite of what this video should be about, isn't it? Let's plop that down here, if it will stay there. Will you stay there? Right, I'm worried about whether you can see me. It doesn't matter, does it? I'm worried about whether you can hear me. Where were we? Velvet Green by Jethro Tull. Off the aforementioned album Songs of the Wood. Songs from the Wood, sorry. Which inspired this video, to be honest. I was listening to that album and I was listening to Velvet Green and I was thinking there's a lot of different ways to personify the English pastoral. And one of the ways you could do it is in the sense of a romp, pulling into all that sort of folklore that surrounds, you know, Morris dancing and all that type of stuff. And there's quite an archaic, anarchic quality to that aspect of the English aesthetic. And I think the punk rockers were brilliant at galvanising that. And it's interesting with Songs from the Wood, which was, we're in the latter stages of the classic prog era. Jethro Tull has done its Minstrel in the Gallery, it's done its Thick as a Brick, it's done all these epic things and really pushed it. And on Songs from the Wood, which is one of their most complex albums, Barrymore Barlow is just unbelievable on it. As well as being expansive, it pulls in. Now, when I looked at this video, I thought, I'm sure there must be better examples of the English aesthetic by Jethro Tull. And I went on to the earlier albums, and although there is a very strong Englishness there, there's no songs that actually deal with this. And they do it on Songs of the Wood. Next on the list. Oh, let's squaddle down here. Just refer to. Oh, when I drove home over here, I thought you've got to learn the list. So I was saying it to myself, and I knew I'd cock up. So at number 6, I've got Marianne by Robert Wyatt. Robert Wyatt, of course, is originally the drummer with Soft Machine, and then I think in 1971, 72, 73, somewhere around then, he decided to get up to some drunken japes at a party, and he ended up falling out of a window and he broke his spine, and from that point on he was paralysed. He had to rethink his career, and not being the obvious pop star material, he decided to go down that route and start singing. For me, there is nobody that personifies the English aesthetic more than Robert Wyatt. There's a sophistication and a naivety to his singing. A lot of the stuff he did was not only his own songwriting, but he started to do cover versions of other people. You know, I'm a Believer by the Monkees. So he puts himself in the same bracket as almost like a sort of Tom Jones or a Frank Sinatra. It's quite interesting. And Marianne, which is off the album Sleep, which is one of the most beautiful songs that I know, is actually him putting words, when it might not be him, it could be his wife or someone else, I don't know. But someone has put words to a track by Philip Catherine that was on an early fusion album he made, which is called Niram. He reversed the word to spell out Marianne, and it delves into this idea, which a lot of songs do, for example, Song of the Siren does, of being away from this and sending a message across the seas, and that message being, you know, passed back to you know, pass back to your loved ones who are at home when you're away, almost like a sailor's song. I'm just outside Kidderminster, my hometown, and just up the road, Starport, we had a singer-songwriter emerge who I met a couple of times before he died sadly of MS, called Clifford T. Ward. And Clifford T. Ward had a big hit with the tune Gay, but he also wrote a song called Home Thoughts from Abroad, and Marianne is in that territory. I don't talk about all this stuff on the channel that much, but I really do love this stuff. So that's what I've got, whatever number it was. What number was it? I feel a little bit more relaxed now. Number 6, right, so it's to number 5. I'm going to take a walk again now. Oh, you know what's worrying me? I'm going to tell you what's worrying me is when I was filming this, I wanted it all done in one take, and I accidentally pressed the stop. So my artistic vision of just being here, no clever graphics, nothing. I'll just be in the countryside and I'll walk around and whatever happens, happens. Once I pressed that, I got really stressed out. And I don't even know if my computer is going to be able to edit these together in 4K, thus defeating the eye. So I've come up here with all these ideas and wants and intentions. It's all about me. It's all about the eye. It's all about creativity, right? But I've gone to the forest because it represents the opposite of that. It represents connection. And I start filming. This is like a lesson. Doing this has been like a lesson for me. And that's really what you're watching on this video. Those people who just come here to get the top 10, I hope you're enjoying this so far. And you go, what's Andy going to do next? I'll tell you what I'm going to do next. It's Starship Trooper by Yes, which is perhaps my favourite Yes song. But what's more important is, you know, it's documenting something here, because I do feel myself, and you can probably see it. I am feeling a level of relaxation. I'm having to talk to you guys. I'm having to keep the video going, and I see what attention that is. But really, I mean, listen. As soon as you shut up, there's a stillness. I can also hear some footsteps. Which are a little bit creepy as well. I can't see anybody. I really can't. I can hear footsteps. Can you hear them? Or is that someone chopping wood? So, number 5, Starship Trooper. It's incredible, isn't it? Do I have to say anything about it? Last track on the Yes album. First progressive rock album I ever heard. And that final track, which is in like 3 parts. And it's all expansive, isn't it? It's all expansive at the start. Sister Bluebird, go flying. And like I say, we're out in the sky, we're out in the open, the vast vistas. And then in the middle it comes down and you have that little jaunt, don't you, with the acoustic guitars. And it sings about loneliness. And then it opens back out with the worm, that big something that Yes didn't explore that much after that. That sort of improvised building jam. Chris Squire is just it's just an incredible track. And it rocks, but it gives me a feeling of this. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. See, I'm panicking again. Oh, I'm panicking. I don't even get up. Let's see what we've got. We're still going. Let's head out. Let's head outside. Get it. We're deep in this forest. Deep. And we're listening. And you know the next tune I've got? I had to put some classical on here. I could have easily just filled this one up with classical music. At number 4, if you listen, you might hear a cuckoo. Did you hear it? Listen. Of course. That's me, you fool. I'm doing that. But it would have been nice if there was one there. So this tune that I've got number 4 is by Deus. And it describes the feeling of hearing the first cuckoo of spring. And it's called On Hearing the First Cuckoo of Spring. Deus, I think, he ended up... I don't know much about classical music. I know... Was he English or was he French? He's English, but a lot of our composers like Holst and Deus, they don't sound very English to me, but I think that's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, Deus, he lived in France, south of France, and so he evokes the countryside in a way that's quite. It's more ebullient than other composers when they do it. And On Hearing the First Cuckoo of Spring is that there is a sort of more European approach. It's so gorgeous and beautiful, and it's almost like over the top. But those composers at that time, the sort of post-romantic British composers, for me, can God, this is getting a bit in depth. They really evoke something that I had to put on this list. And when I wrote down the thing, I thought I'll put 3 on. You've got 3 on here, and they had to end up right top of the list. But beating them at number 3 by one of the greatest artists of all time, one of my favourite artists, an artist that I never speak about on my channel, I have Riverman by Nick Drake, which is an incredible tune, which is not only evokes the English countryside, obviously, but there's a mysticism to it. And it seems there's a mysticism surrounding death. It's always evoked in me the idea of crossing the river and paying the ferryman to take you across the river. You know, pulling into that whole sort of Dante and Voyages to the Underworld, and knowing the backstory with Nick Drake, that is quite a profound thought. When I thought about where does this tune exist on my list, I decided to put it on. And the instant I heard it, I burst out crying. It's just an incredible piece of music. It's one of the greatest pieces of music ever made. It's actually very simple. It's a very simple tune. But it's in 5/4, and I think it's the 5/4 that gives it the interest, and the fact that the chords are quite twisty. It's a beautiful song. Right, at number 2, I have, and this was number 1, I've got The Lark Ascending by Ralph Vaughan Williams. Okay, Britain's favourite piece of classical music in a poll they did, and God, what a piece of music it is. Many years ago, I was teaching a class of rockers. We started to talk about classical music, and I said, well, the most popular classical piece of music, because the kids were going, I don't really listen to popular music, I don't listen to classical music, Andy. You know, what should we listen to? And I said, well, the most popular piece is The Lark Ascending by Ralph Vaughan Williams. Oh, let's have a listen to it. And back then, I was in this big room where the kids were sat, and we had this huge PA so I could run the music in, and it would engulf you. And I put it on, and these kids were just blown away by it. Absolutely blown away. They loved it. They all wanted a copy of it. And what was fascinating to me was that if you listen to it, there's no big tune. It's a fantasy. It's a violin being like a lark, right? And dodging and weaving in a way that almost a jazz musician would, right? There doesn't seem to be any jazz in that tune, but the way it operates is very much like a jazz piece. And it shows how Ralph Vaughan Williams was able to take this sort of ancient Englishness that he was so great at pursuing, and bring it together with really modern aspects. He was a very modernist composer, Ralph Vaughan Williams was, and he People don't think he is because of the fact that he's got such a strong love and allegiance to the English aesthetic. You've got a doggy coming up over here. So that's what I got at number 2. I have walked around in a big circle. I didn't mean to. I've walked around in a big circle and we're back where we started. I'm going to head for home because I want to show you the lake if I can get a bit closer to it. And so on this video, it would have started out right in the heart of the forest. We've got to go deep in and eventually you'll come out to the open uplands of whatever this is. So I think you've got to do it. People have to. You know, I'm working so hard at the moment trying to get stuff happening. At number 1, I've got Nimrod from the Enigma Variations by Edward Elgar. A piece of music that was inspired by the Malvern Hills that are around about 20 miles away from where we are now. And I didn't even want to put it on the list. I thought I've got to put that one on it. Nothing personifies England and the English countryside and a sense of pride in that as well, a sense of patriotism. You got to remember, as I film this, we're in the Euros and I'm driving around seeing all these sort of St George's crosses everywhere, the big red cross. And some people find that really upsetting. They think it represents some sort of right-wing, you know, intolerant attitude. And I'm sure many people have used it in that. But for me, it doesn't. It personifies a thing that I would call the English settlement, which is the title also of an XTC album. Right, so we're here. I'll switch it around. So as we see this scene, and we get to exiting the forest, I want you to play in your head. I don't want to put it on here. It'd be too cheesy. But I want you to play in your head Nimrod. And if you haven't heard it, go and put it on. And if you are an English person or a British person, I hope it gives you that sense of pride. There's nothing wrong in feeling proud about things like Nimrod and Edward Elgar and all these beautiful things. I don't think there's any problem with that. On another video I said the exact opposite, so I'll get picked up on that. But that's a debate for another day. I can't tie everything up on these videos. I can't control it all. You know, this is not what's going on. We're always looking for a path out, aren't we? In the end, we're looking for a path out. Nobody knows, do we? We don't know. I come on here and pretend I know. I have to be the fountain of knowledge, don't I? But I don't know anything, do I? Back to the car park. There's the water mill I told you about, paper mill. And there is Hercote Pool. I really wonder if there is a German fighter airplane under that water. I really don't believe it. Not for one instant. This is like a thing, when I used to come down here as a kid, you'd always, in the end, just before you went, you'd come and look at this little overflow for the lake.